All right, welcome to Strider Tree Gear. Today we're going to talk about a little bit of pruning. All right, so if you're getting ready to do some pruning, there's a couple of tools that are really useful. So this is a professional arborist pruning saw. It's made by Silky. Silky makes fantastic saws. You should clean off the blade with some bleach so you're not transmitting bacterial vectors. Trees can catch a cold similar to humans. Bacteria can cause problems and you don't want to pass it from tree to tree. So a nice sharp pruning saw is great. Also pass-through pruners. There's little hand ones where the blades actually pass through each other so it doesn't just come to a stop. It actually pushes through. Like if you look at this here, this blade doesn't stop where it meets that, it passes all the way through. So it's called a pass-through pruner. They tend to make cleaner cuts and leave less tear out. You want some good pass-through pruners, whether it's by hand or the loppers, or this one, which is actually on a pole, which is great for grabbing tips from way up in the tree. So those are your primary pruning tools. If you need to cut something big and fast, you can use a chainsaw, but you want to make sure that you make your first cut away from the branch collar so that in case it peels out a little bit, you won't have a big scar down the side of your tree. So you make your first cut out a little ways from the branch collar, and then you flush it with the chainsaw afterward. And that'll get you a long way when it comes time to go pruning. So let's go check out the tree over here that we're going to do some work on. All right, so today we're out on the job. I'm doing some pruning on these live oaks that are going to be kind of the centerpiece of the landscape on this new construction here in Auburn. So here we have a live oak, and the kind of pruning I'm doing today is mostly aesthetic pruning. These you could pretty much just let them grow how they're going to be, and they will generally be all right. There's a few things that you want to shoot for when you're pruning most any tree. Dead and dying limbs, limbs that are crossed and rubbing, and in this case I'm going to prune also for aesthetics, which is going to mean a little bit of an interior clean out, so there's a little bit more airflow. A lot of trees can benefit from that because it helps prevent some of the moisture caused vectors like funguses or molds, so it can reduce that to some degree. And it also looks really good when the inside's a little bit more cleaned out. So we've got this fairly small young live oak, and I'm going to demonstrate a few of the prime pruning cuts, and we're going to do a little bit of an interior clean out. I would generally work to get a more even structure around the outside of the canopy, but in this case this one's really nice, so it doesn't need much of any of that. What I'm aiming for when I'm going to prune the structure of the trees, I want the canopy, I want all the outside of the canopy to have nice sun exposure. If I've got branches that are real tight to the inside and low, I either got to cut them off or I have to reduce the branches above them so that those low ones are now in the sun. In this case, we've got this nice round canopy, so I don't really have to mess with much. I am going to cut a few of these underside branches, and I'll demonstrate that right now. So as I'm looking at this tree, some of the things that stand out to me is this density on the inside. So I'm going to take my little Silky, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut out quite a few of these little guys. Not all of them, because I don't want to lion's tail it. And if you don't know what lion's tailing is, you should look it up online because there's some great pictures of it. But I'm going to just take some of this out. Some of these guys that are pointing straight down as well. A lot of these low branches that are going towards the ground, they're not likely to ever see sun or very much sun, so I'm sort of jumping the gun and pruning things that the tree is eventually going to eliminate on its own. Most trees will self-prune, which just means that they will kill off their own branches when they don't get enough sun exposure. And that's a pretty normal thing for trees to do. So if your tree's got a whole bunch of little dead branches on the inside, it's probably not a big deal, because those are branches that just aren't seeing the sun, and so the tree doesn't really need them. Those leaves aren't producing much. They're using up more energy than they're consuming, than they're producing. So this tree is a evergreen. It's an evergreen deciduous tree, which means that it's gonna have its leaves all year round. So I don't have the pleasure of pruning when it's totally dormant. But at the same time, it also means that I get to see real obviously which branches are already dead and which ones are not. Because a dead branch didn't have much for leaves on it. So you can see here, I'm going around. This one actually has pretty good sun exposure, but it's a little bit dense. There's some crossing limbs here, so we'll free that up. We'll go around here, cut this low one here. We got another crosser here. That one's kind of long and getting into this other guy's zone, so we'll take it out. So I want to point out the difference between a proper pruning cut and a heading cut. Some of these are pretty close, so someone's pruned this before. If you look here, it's had a nice little pruning cut there. There's a nice little pruning cut here, and this one here. And those are mostly pretty good. This one's starting to get a little bit long. So the difference between a pruning cut and a heading cut is if you look at a limb, if we take this little branch for example, and I want to stimulate growth in a particular direction. Let's say I want this limb to grow this way towards the sun. Well, I want to prune away a section of branch that leaves a section of branch pointing the way I want. So we look at this little tip right here. We've got 2 bits of the branch. One's going the wrong way, one's going the right way. And so what I'm going to do to make a proper pruning cut is cut right at the union of those 2 branches. Maybe we'll get a bigger branch here so you can see. So I'm going to make a little cut there. I've got these cut resistant gloves that'll help. Really, I should cut that with a pass-through pruner. So let's go bigger. Let's find a better branch. All right, over here is a better one. Okay, so I've got this piece of the branch that's going down. This one's coming out to my right, going into the sun. I kind of like both of those. Let's just say I were to make the cut right here in the middle of the branch. I'd say, okay, I'm gonna cut that one off because that's an easy cut to make. Well, that's what we call a heading cut. This will tend to promote a bunch of growth, responsive growth off the trunk right here around where that cut was made. And that's gonna look ugly over time. Either that or it won't have anything and this will just be a dead, rotting little stick. But if we make this cut right here at the branch collar, come around, it's just barely big enough to warrant using a silky. Man, that is ugly. Don't show your arborist friends. All right, so now we've got it right at the branch collar. Now that's gonna tend to stimulate growth in this part of the branch that I left. And in this case, that's what we wanna do. In fact, this branch here is kind of turning all the way around and going up underneath where it's getting overshadowed over there. So I think I'm probably gonna eliminate this branch entirely, or at least to this point. So I'm gonna make one more cut right here and try not to make a heading cut. All right, and now I left this little bit, and so it should stimulate growth in this direction. Get rid of that. Now it's got some space to move. See this? I'll also tend to prune branches that are pointing straight down, unless you're trying to get a droopy effect, which can look really nice with certain trees. This tree, not so much. All right, so Now I'm all wrapped up with that tree. I want you to take a look at it with me here. So we've shaped it just a little bit. I took out a few of the high tops that were shooting up in the middle so that there's a nice even distribution of sunlight. Sunlight will even has some areas to penetrate down onto the interior of the tree where there's still some foliage left. We've lifted up the tips down low a little bit. We've opened up the inside for some airflow. I've removed quite a few dead branches and quite a few crossers, and that's gonna be a beautiful little tree here. Could probably use a pruning similar in every couple of years, but even if you were to just leave it alone at this point, it'll be just fine because it's a native species, and these live oaks are incredibly hardy and they do really well. So thank you for joining me, Strider Tree Gear. Hope you found this informative and useful. If you liked it, let me know, comment, subscribe, and hope to see you next time. Thanks again.